He is the Health Secretary Steve Barclay, who joins us live from Westminster. Good morning to you, Mr. Barclay.
Good morning.
Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Lots of health stories to talk about, including the ongoing junior doctor strike. But I do want to start with the story of the last, week, year, 5 years, migrant crisis. The migrant crisis to last at least 5 more years, according to a Home Office internal memo. Why is it going to last so long when the Prime Minister says he's going to stop the boats and wants to be judged on that in 2024?
Well, it's... Obviously, ministers don't comment on leaks, Julia, but the point is there's a world of difference between saying a facility could be available for up to 5 years and saying an issue will last for 5 years. And the key point is we are making progress. The number of Albanians has come down 90% since the returns deal was put in place. The number of boats being caught by the French authorities has increased by 40%. The overall number of crossings is down compared to this time last year. So progress is being made, but I absolutely accept that more needs to be done, and that's why we're taking the decision on Rwanda to the Supreme Court. We want to ensure that we're able to process migrants through the policy in Rwanda, and we're committed to doing much more in this. So we are making progress, but there is more to do, and that's what we're committed to doing.
And are you among the Cabinet Ministers who is committed to, willing to consider leaving the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, so that we can actually carry out the policies that the British voters want?
Well, we're committed to taking that decision to the Supreme Court. We think that is the right next step. The Prime Minister himself has said we will do whatever it takes, and I absolutely support him on that. But at the moment, we will go to the Supreme Court. We think that is the right approach. We are making progress overall in bringing the numbers of crossings down. And it's also right that we tackle this issue for the British taxpayer. It's costing £6 million a day for hotels to house these migrant applicants. It's right we get that cost down. That's why we're using things like the barges. So we're getting the cost down, we're getting the number of crossings down, but we absolutely recognise there is more to do, and that's why we're taking this case to the Supreme Court.
But you've got a backlog of 170,000 asylum seekers stroke illegal migrants applications waiting to be decided. You've got 51,000 migrants in nearly 400 hotels. Things like the Bibi Stockholm barge, with or without Legionella, housing 500, is a drop in the ocean, isn't it? Why is it taking so long to process these asylum applications, given that it never used to take this long? What's changed? And does it have anything to do with pretty much everyone at the Home Office working from home?
I mean, the challenge of migration is one not just faced by the UK. You can see that, for example, in Italy, across Europe. It is a much wider challenge. So we're not alone in facing these challenges. We're taking action across a range of fronts to accelerate the processing of applications so that those with a legitimate claim are processed quickly, but also those who don't can be returned. We're putting in place return agreements. For example, the one I mentioned with Albania, that's seen a 90% fall in the numbers coming over from Albania. But we're also looking at how, through the legal process, we get the powers to be able to then process claims in Rwanda. We think that will have a significant deterrent effect. So there's no single answer to this. This is a complex issue. It's one that a number of other countries are facing. We are making progress on it, but we think the cost to the taxpayer at £6 million a day for hotels is far too high. We need to bring that down, and that's why we're looking at barges, but it's one of a number of things we're exploring.
I think we all accept it's complex. There are lots of different ways of dealing with this, but we know what happened on Saturday. 6 Afghan migrants dead on that migrant crossing, some 550 having to be rescued. But again, hundreds coming across over the weekend, as always. But there's all this evidence that these French boats, French Navy, escorting these ramshackle boats with people, close to drowning, to British waters for them to be rescued by British boats. Why do we not escort these boats back to French waters to let the French deal with it?
Well, obviously what happened at the weekend is a heartbreaking tragedy, and I think everyone was shocked when they saw that.
Were you shocked? I wasn't shocked. 70 people get onto a boat meant for about 10, and then they haven't got life jackets on, and people die. I think that's one of the least shocking things I've ever heard.
Well, this is why we need to take the action that we're doing, Julia, and this is why we need to clamp down on the activities of the people smugglers and the criminal gangs who are behind this. But the best way to do that is to work constructively with the French authorities. They have stopped more than 40% an increase in the boat stock compared to last year, and the best way forward is to be working constructively with them. But it's one of a number of things that we're doing, along with, as I say, using the barges, taking the case to the Supreme Court. This is a Home Office lead, but they're exploring all options on this in order to get those numbers down, and indeed they are making progress on that.
One final question on migrants before we go into the NHS, your area of responsibility, of course. Poland, the Polish Prime Minister is going to hold a referendum mid-October asking Polish people if they want to accept an EU plan to distribute migrants evenly among member states. Basically, he says forced relocation of illegal arrivals, largely from Middle East and African countries. We're not in the EU anymore, thankfully, to Brexit campaigners like your good self. Do we need a referendum in the UK on this issue about how many people and from where we are willing to take?
Well, we've got a plan, and we're working through the plan we've got. And as I say, that includes, for example, processing claims in Rwanda. It includes reducing the cost of hotels through innovations such as barges. It's about working in partnership with the French authorities to stop more boats upstream. But it's also taking action on the criminal gangs in country.
Would you mind answering my question, sir? Should we have a referendum on this issue?
We need a referendum at this point.
No? But you don't think the British people should have their say?
We have a plan. Well, I think the British people have had their say. They want to see the boat stop. That's why the Prime Minister made it one of the 5 key pledges that he's focused on. We're making progress on that pledge, but we accept, Julia, there's much more to do, and we're committed to doing so. Let's
talk about your area of responsibility then. As the Health Secretary, we are on the 4th day of the junior doctor strike. Yet another one, 1 million appointments cancelled. We've got waiting lists up to 7.6 million patients. 1 in 8 people in this country waiting for NHS treatment. How and when is this going to end?
Well, we've accepted in full, Julia, the recommendations of the independent pay review body process. What that means for a junior doctor starting this summer is a pay rise of 10.3%. The average increase for junior doctors is 8.8%, and we think that is the right approach. We've also listened to the BMA's request more widely on things like changes to pensions for consultants, where a hugely generous offer means that consultants who retire at 65 will get a pension of over £70,000 a year. So we've listened to the BMA in terms of changes on pensions. We've accepted in full the recommendations of the pay review process, and it's harming patients for the BMA to take what seems to be increasingly a politically motivated strike against the government, and doesn't recognise the fact that junior doctors are getting an average of 8.8% in terms of their pay rise this year.
OK, can I ask you also about an announcement you're doing today? The government is consulting on having new insert cards inside cigarette packs to try and encourage smokers to quit. What's it going to involve? How much is it going to cost me as a taxpayer, and is it going to work?
Well, in terms of is it going to work, it's about looking at best practice internationally, and for example, Canada has been using these inserts, and the data suggests that it does work. And you and I, Julia, have talked in the past about concerns with the nanny state, how we better empower people to take the right decisions for themselves rather than being told what to do. And so the inserts are really a positive step. It's looking at best practice internationally and saying, how do we best signpost those people who want to give up smoking to go and access the right services? Because we know, in terms of the causes of cancer, the #1 cause is smoking. We know that many people who smoke want to give up, and sometimes people need that encouragement. They need signposting to the right way to do so. So this is about looking at what's worked in Canada, what lessons we can take, and it's something we're consulting on.
OK, just finally, if you were to dial 999, if there was an emergency in your home, fire, a burglar broken in, someone who's had a heart attack, would you expect to be asked what your preferred pronouns were?
No, and I think, Julia, you know from past conversations, that's not the sort of thing I support. I wrote out to health bodies in March, being very clear on my expectations that they shouldn't be using organisations like Stonewall with their own agenda. I think I'm very clear in terms of the steer that I'm giving to health authorities, and I don't think, to answer your question, that is the sort of thing should be...
Well, hold on a minute, you're the Health Secretary. You don't want Stonewall involved, you don't want that sort of nonsense going on, which most people don't. So why is it happening happening in the NHS? Why are 30 NHS trusts allowing Stonewall to set their gender policy? Why are people on 999 operating officers? Why are they being told to ask callers that? Why don't you say, as Health Secretary, stop doing it? If you carry on doing it, you're going to be sacked. Why? That's what happens in most organisations.
It is, but as you know, NHS England by law is legally operationally independent, so there are sort of legal structures as to how these things, but I've written to them to set out that expectation, and clearly we'll be following up on them based on the stories we've seen in recent days.
All right, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Health Secretary Steve Barclay joining us live there outside Millbank in Westminster.